Hello, my name is Aaron Balke, and today we're going to be implementing OAuth 2.0 from scratch. The reason we're doing this is, at least for me, I really had no idea how OAuth worked. And OAuth, whenever I looked up demonstrations and sort of explanations, a lot of times it just showed you the client side and what's happening from the client's perspective and not really from the server's perspective. So I wanted to create a all-encompassing explanation and implementation of OAuth so you can see what's happening on the server side, and that should help better understand and hopefully troubleshoot stuff better, and perhaps even if you're crazy, implement it yourself, hopefully very carefully. So OAuth is a method of giving a third party, a separate service, access to data on another service without giving that service requesting the data access to your username and password as a user. And the reason we would want to not give this other service your username as password is data protection, and also we want to be able to revoke that permission if the third party, the other service that's accessing the data, we no longer want it to access the data, or we want to limit its scope to that data. And so that's the whole reason OAuth is implemented in other situations. Some examples that I've run into personally is when I have my script in order to upload to YouTube, I need to connect to YouTube, and I don't want to give my CLI application my username and password. That would be, I guess for my situation, not that big of a deal because it's my CLI. But if it was someone else's CLI, I wouldn't want to give access to my username and password to that CLI. And so using OAuth, I authenticate with the Google server and the Google API, and then give permission for this CLI tool to access it. Another example would be oftentimes the example oftentimes used, and the example we're going to be using, is a print service that wants to access your photo library. So how do we share a limited how do we limit the scope of the photos being shared with that print service, and can we make sure that print service doesn't have access to our username and password? So those are a couple implementations, and we're going to use that print service and photo gallery example in our implementation. It's going to be way more rudimentary than that, but I hope you enjoy. Alrighty, just for a quick demonstration of what we're going to be doing today, I have on the left here the RFC 6749 spec, specifically the authorization code grant spec. That way you have a little bit of a visualization of what's happening. And on the right here, I have the browser that I'm using for this interaction. We're going to create a print shop, which is going to want to access a photo gallery on a separate service. And what we don't want is to share with the print shop our username, our password, all of this sort of stuff that is really connected to us as individuals. We want to be able to revoke from the print shop access to those gallery photos if we want to, and we also want to limit the scope that the print shop has access to those photos. So maybe we want it only to be able to view instead of edit photos, or maybe we have specific photos we don't want the print shop to have access to, So that is what this demonstration is going to show how to do, show how the OAuth is implemented for this situation. In this implementation and in OAuth, the different parts are as follows. You have the client, which is that service requesting access to the data, and in our situation, that's the print shop. And then you have the authorization server and resource server. Oftentimes these are combined to be the same, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes you have a third party like Google do the authorization, or Facebook, or I believe even like EVA Online does OAuth for people. So you have them do the authorization. In our implementation, these will be combined. Both the authorization server and resource server will be the same. That's our photo gallery app that we're trying to access the data of. And then the user agent, this is how the user interacts with both the server and client. And so in our situation, that will be the browser. And then the resource owner is us, the user trying to give access to the client, the print shop, the photos. So let's just show what's happening here. The first thing that happens, the first thing that occurs is the user agent and the client through the user agent requests the access through the authorization server. So the client says, hey, I have the client ID, the client secret scope, all that good stuff. Can I have access to the super secret data? So we'll put in our client ID and then our client secret, which will be Alpine, I believe is what we set it as. And the scope will be all. And then as soon as that happens, the authorization server says, all right, we're going to have the user authenticate and make sure that this is okay. We want to have the user fully aware of what's occurring, that the print service is trying to request access to your photos. And as you can see, the blue screen here, this is the server talking, not the client. The client is the white screen, server is the blue screen. Now, a lot is going to happen here fast once you hit allow, so I'm going to explain it and then we're going to click it. The next thing that happens is a authorization code is sent from the authorization server to the user agent, to the browser, which then gets shared with the client. And so the authorization server sends the authorization code to the client. The photo gallery, once it's allowed, will send the code to the print shop. Then the print shop will take that code, send it back to the authorization server and say, all right, we got the code and we're ready to get access to the data by you handing us an access token. And if everything validates and is all good, the authorization server will then send the access token to the client. And that's the final step. The client, the print shop, now has the access token from the photo gallery service server, and with that access token they can now access the resource, the super secrets that you didn't want to just throw out there for fun. And so all of that happens when you hit allow. And there we go. On the client, it now has access to the super secret photos. So this is on the print shop. The print shop now has access to the super secret photos that are on the photo gallery. So that's just a quick demonstration before we get started so you can see what's happening and sort of have a general idea of how OAuth works. So let's get our project set up. We are going to, first we're going to make a directory. We'll do OAuth. That's embarrassing. All right, we'll do so we're going to do a new directory. We'll call this OAuth demo, if I could spell. And then we'll go into OAuth demo. Inside here, we're going to need to break things down into the client and the server. And those we need to break down because they're going to be two separate machines that are going to be accessed. So we're going to have to be running two binaries at the same time, one for the client and one for the server. So we're going to make a client folder. We're going to need to make a server folder. And then inside each of these, we're going to have to initiate in Go. So we'll do Go init client, Go mod init client, Okay, and then we'll do the same for the server. Go mod init server. Now we should have both the client and the server with Go mods. Okay. All right, so we got the two different packages going in Go. And then we're going to want to, let's start with doing the server. We'll just make a basic server and we'll call that server Go. And this basic server for right now is just going to be the, we're going to have just a basic route, and then we'll go from there and build on that. It is going to be important to define some constants. We're going to have a port for the server, which will be, let's say 8080. And we'll have the server URL, which is going to be HTTP localhost 8080. And we're going to need a main function. In this main function, we're going to have just that basic route. So we'll do handle func. If my LSP likes me, handle func. There we go. One day it'll like me. And we'll do a root. Yeah, we'll just, for right now, we'll just put directly in here. So the function to handle the root route. And in here, we will print to the response writer just a standard hello world. So we'll do hello world. And then we can exit the function, but we are going to need a listener, and we'll put that in a log for troubleshooting. So we'll do HTTP listen and serve. We're going to listen and serve at our port, and we got nil for the end there. So we'll go into there, we'll go into the server folder, and now that we got it saved, let's just try running that server, make sure we got a server up and running. Localhost, we did 8080, I believe. And there we go. We have a hello world, so our server is running properly. Okay, so we got the server running, and then what we could do, let's just copy this file into the client. Copy, paste, and then we'll rename this to be client Go. Got the client now, and for the client, we're going to have the port be 8090. And we'll do the same situation as we had here. And I believe we're going to need, yeah, we'll need the server, and we're also going to need the client URL. So we'll do client URL. And the client URL will be client URL will be 8090. All right, so we got the server running. Let's get the client running. And let's change up the hello world text. Hello client. So hopefully we got the client running as well. So this is the server running with hello world on port 8080. And then we have localhost, and let's check 8090. Hello client. All right, so we have the server and the client running in this situation. So Now what we're going to do is go back to our Cody and let's go back to the spec. I think we're in a good spot to just immediately go back to the spec and keep reading. So, first step to implementing the authorization code grant OAuth is going to be to initiate the flow using the client and direct the user, the resource owner in the browser to the authorization endpoint. And so we're going to have to input into the client ID, the state, all of these sorts of variables into the client, which is our print service, in order to ask the photo library for the information. And so we need to provide that information in order to make the request from the client to the server. So let's go back, and the simplest way to do this is going to be using a form that we fill out on the client. And just a reminder, the client is the print service that's wanting to access the photos in the photo service, which is the server. So we're going to want to go back. Let's do from the client. And inside the client, we're going to want to set up that initial form. So let's go in here. Now that we know the server's running, we can get rid of this right there. And we'll have a root, which will be a function in order to handle the, be a handler for the root route. So we'll do func root, and it's going to take the same parameters that HTTP response writer and the HTTP request. Alrighty. And we're going to want to create a HTML form that we can input the client ID and all of that information into, and then send from the client to the server. So we'll do a variable which will be the string of the, this is a janky templates is what we'll call this. So we'll do a sprintf in order to build our HTML to send to the browser. And so we'll do a duck type HTML. We'll have the head. We're going to need HTML first. We'll have HTML. We'll end the HTML. Inside here, we'll have the head. Get rid of the head. We'll have the body. Get rid of the body. And for the title, since this is the client, we'll have print shop, let's say. That'll be the title. Inside the body, we're going to need some sort of header of some sort. So we'll do the same thing. We'll call this print shop. And then some sort of request from the client to the user for why they're inputting this info. So something like share photo data with print shop. All right, there we go. And then we're going to need the form that's actually being submitted. So we'll go form. And in this implementation, we're going to use the get method to send in that form. If we read the spec and go on down to the authorization request, they do use the get method, and they do suggest putting them in as the query components, as the query parameters for the using the form. The form as a using the form data type using the query parameters is what I'm trying to say. So we will do that as well. And while we're here, we can take a look at what we need to send with the authorization request. So we're going to need to send in a response type, and since we're using the authorization code grant version, we are going to have to set this to code. That way the server knows what method you're using, what type of grant you're using. We're also going to need to send the client ID. The client ID is sort of like the username of this connection, of this connection between the client and the server. And so the client ID needs to be sent to say, hey, this is the connection I'm trying to make. And then we have the redirect URI. This is the URI URL that you want the server to send the access code and all that information back to when things are all said and done. And so we're going to need to send that as well. Scope, this is how much access you want to give the client. And so in the print example, maybe you only want the print shop to have access to one file of your photo gallery. I'm sure there's reasons you would want that, so you would have a limited scope and provide that in the request as well. And then state is a variable in the value of this state variable is to keep the client and the server in the same on the same page. You're going to want to make sure that if something gets intercepted or a man in the middle, something like that, that the state is the same between the client and the server, and they will be checking each other to make sure that the state variable is the same. Because if you have someone who has the client ID, the redirect URI, the secret, you want to make sure that the only connection trying to make it is one that has the state variable that's the same between each request between the client and the server. So that's what the state variable is that we're going to be including as well. And this is going to be sent through the form, and then we just redirect to the, after we're done here, we're going to redirect to login or accept the giving access to the client. And that's something we're going to send to the user agent or the browser for the user to hit allow or deny on. So let's get that going. So we gotta put in a response type, client ID, redirect URI, scope, and state into the form. We are also going to put in a client secret, and that's just so there's just one form that someone has to fill out as opposed to multiple inputs throughout this this implementation. And some of these values, like response type, you don't really need the user to put in this information, so we're just going to have these as hidden values in the form. The redirect URI we won't need either, and state we won't either. State we're just going to use a random integer in order to fill that in. So let's get back over here. We're going to do a method equals a get. We're going to do action, which for right now, I guess we'll just send it back to itself. It shouldn't be a big deal. We'll be able to read the values in the URL, the query params, and go from there, make sure it's actually being submitted. So we'll just return it on itself for right now. So we're going to get that first input, and that's going to be, we'll have a type, we'll have a name. Let's just get a little template going here, and a value, which is equal to nothing. And then we're going to have the response type, the state, redirect URI, client ID, client server, and scope. I believe that is 6. So we'll do 6, I believe. I'll start going and see if that's enough. And we're going to have 3 of them, which are hidden, which is that response type, that state, and redirect URI, since those are things we don't actually want the user to be entering when it comes time. So these all will be hidden. And first one we decided was response type. And for the value of the response type, it always is code in this situation, since we're only doing the authorization code grant. The next one we'll do is state, and this is going to be a variable that we input ourselves. So this will be a decimal, a digit, so we're going to put that in there. And we'll have in the sprintf that variable. Then the next one will be the redirect URI, if I can spell. And this is also going to be something we input from the from earlier. We're actually going to be using the client ID up here in order to do that. So this one right there. So put that in. Next one we're going to have is the client ID. Yep. Type is going to be text. Name is going to be client ID. And that's one that isn't going to have a value because it's going to have it inputted. We're going to also have client secret. And we're going to want scope. Then at the very bottom of the form, we're just going to have a button of type submit in order to submit the form. Name will be action, and value will be equal to allow. And the text on the button will be the word allow. For these visible client ID, client secret, and scope, we are also going to need labels on these forms. So we'll do label, type equals text. Excuse me, 4 equal to client ID. And we'll do client ID and the label. Client secret, for scope, and I think that is all of it there. Okay, and we're going to need the values that change, which will be the state, which is going to be a random int just for this demo, and we're also going to have the redirect URI, which is going to be the client URL. So let's define the state variable up here, and like I said, we'll just do a random int, and that should handle that. Then we're just going to want to write that to the response writer. So format f, print f, and HTML. All right, so let's see if the print shop URL now works, if the form on it now works for authorizing stuff. All right, this should hopefully, if everything worked out, be a nice form. All righty. It's not a pretty form, but it is a form. So we got print shop, share photo data with print shop. And when we input a client ID, say, what's up? Let's say print shop. And the client secret, let's say, is just a bunch of random characters. And scope, let's just say all. When we hit allow, it should put up at the top a slash and then the query params, including these and those hidden ones that were either automatically made, like the state and redirect URI, or were the same value always like code. So let's hit allow. And as we can see, it may be a little bit hard to see from your guys' view, but we do have up there those query params. We have the response type code, state, which is a jumble of numbers, redirect URI, client ID as print shop, client secret as the one we inputted, the scope equals all, and action equals allow. So that's great news. The form is working. So what we do now that we have this working form, and what we do need to do is we need to send it to the authorization server. So we're now going to send it from the client, the print shop, the 8090. We're now going to send this form data to 8080, which is our server. So we're going to send it there and then have it validate the information, make sure everything's in there and everything is correct. If that's true, everything looks all good, then we're going to send a request to the user agent, to the browser. We're going to say, hey, is this allowed? Does this sound good to share this information? If that's the case, then we move on to the next step. So let's go and start sending stuff everywhere. What we can do, I am going to, instead of sending it directly to the server, this is where things break a little bit. But instead of sending the form directly to the server, I'm going to send it to another route on the client. And the reason for that is these variables I want to save in the client for later on when we're going to need like the client ID at later steps. When we're doing the code, when we're doing the access token request, we're going to need that client ID, the client secret, the scopes again. And so we're going to need all of this information still. And so we want to save that information, and there's not a quick and easy way to do that. The easiest way is just to redirect it to another route on the client, on the print service client, and save that information for later. I'm sure if we were using React, this would be easier, but I figured throwing this in React would be a little overkill. So let's do that. Let's go in here and we'll get it sent to a submit route, and that will just be another route on our client. Submit, and we'll use a different route handler function, which will be func submit. And func submit will take the same stuff as always, response writer, a pointer to the request, and then let's build it in here. So the first thing we're going to want to do whenever we're getting a new form and we're going to validate it, I guess technically since we're still on the client, it doesn't really matter, but we are going to want to validate that it's the right method. We're then going to want to parse the form to make sure all the form data is there, and then we're going to want to pull the variables that we want to keep. So pull params we want to keep, and then finally we're going to want to redirect to the server, and we're going to redirect, send it back to the actually request stuff from the server as opposed to just messing around on the client. So let's validate the method. We're going to go if the method is not equal to get, because we want to make sure we're getting a get response to submit. If that is not the case, we're going to want to throw an error. So we'll do error, and we'll do invalid method. And then we're going to want to parse the form, the params that were sent as the form. So we'll go if error. If we get an error when we're parsing the form, then we're going to want to throw an error as well. And this will just say unauthorized is probably the simplest. Unauthorized. There we go. So we're going to parse the form, and then we're going to want to pull the variables that we want to keep. And so the method we'll do for this, I guess if we're query params, we don't really need to parse the form. Yeah, we don't really need to parse the form since we're sending it as a get, which means They're just query params for the form. It's not like a post that we have to try to parse. So let's just params from the URL query, and we'll do response type. Let's go. Let's just make a nice little function we can use over and over again. So we're going to need the response type, client ID, client secret, redirect, URI, scope, and status. So we're going to need this 6 times. So we'll do response type. We'll do client ID. And then we'll do client secret. And then we'll do redirect URI. And then we'll do scope. And then we'll do state. Now, we could... let's go through it. Actually, put these in there. Did my keyboard malfunction? There we go. All right. What's happening? All right. We'll do response type. We will get the client ID. And we'll get the client secret. And we'll get the redirect URI. And we'll get the scope. And we'll get the state. Now, the variables we're going to want to keep are going to be the client ID, the client secret, the scope, and the state. So let's just throw them all in a bunch of global vars. This is just for demo purposes, so this could be done in much better ways, but just for the demo, let's do this client secret, and we'll just initiate these all as 0 values, and we'll do state equals 0. And then it's going to yell at me because these are already defined. So we don't need to worry about these ones since they're all good to go. We don't need the state up here. Let's take out the state. All right, so we got client ID, client secret, and scope that we're going to need later. So we got those saved. And then we're going to want to build the URL for the actual redirect, actually calling the photo service server. So let's build this URL using our favorite sprintf. And we will do a %s, and we'll send it to, I believe it was authorized they used in the spec. So we'll do authorize, which will take a response type. And that will be equal to a string. We're also going to need the client ID, which will be equal to a string. We're also going to need the redirect URI, which is equal to a string. And we're going to need the scope, which is equal to a string. And we're going to need the state, which is equal to a string. And then we're going to get all these variables. First thing was the client or server URL that we're going to need to input as the base. And then we're going to have response type. We're going to have client ID, redirect URI, scope, and state. Boop, boop. All right, and then redirect to the server. Let's put this up here to make it nice. The redirect will be done using HTTP redirect. No. No, there we go. And that takes the response writer, the request, the URL that we just made, and we'll do a status temporary redirect. So now it should save the client ID, client secret, and scope in the client, the print server for later use. You would probably throw these in a database or something like that. But we're just going to throw them in these global variables for right now. And so get those from the form, and then after doing that, we do send the actual form data to the server, the photo server, in order to make the request. So that is the submission, and now we need to go on the server and actually handle the authorization of that service, of the print service. So right now we have very little happening here, but what we'll do in order to get the server set up is we're going to, it'd be easiest to split stuff into the resource part of the server and the authorization part of the server, because these two aren't necessarily the same server all the time, and they're two different parts, and it'll be easier for describing and showing stuff if we have them separate. So we'll do a auth folder to handle authorization, and then we'll have a resource folder to handle the resource stuff. And while we're here, we can get the data that we're trying to get access to. Let's just put that in here so we have a goal in mind. So we'll have data in the resource. This will be package resource, and it is going to be a var of the secret data, and we'll use a map. This will make more sense at a later time. So we'll do map string, and we'll do print shop as the data owner, and super secret print shop. And that's the data we're trying to get access to from the client. Super secret. I guess it's trying to access photos. There we go. Alrighty, so we got that in there. And we're going to, let's go and delete this hello world example to make sure things were working. And let's go over to auth, and we'll make the first file in there, which is going to be all of the handling for the authorization step, the one we're on right now. So let's go in here, let's go package auth. And inside here, we'll have a func authorize, which will take a HTTP response writer and a HTTP hello. There we go. What you doing? All right, there we go. And we'll go over here. We'll go. We should probably call it from the. I guess we'll do authorize because that's the one in the spec. And we're going to have authorize. We don't need all that jazz. There we go. We don't need format anymore. All right. So now when you hit the authorize route on the server, on the photo server, it's going to throw you over to here. And then over here, we're going to want to authorize the service, handle the authorization request, all of that good stuff. So first step to authorize the service, we're going to want to ensure the method is correct. So validate method. Second thing we're going to want to do is validate the request. So this will be checking all of the stuff going on in the request, all the values, make sure they make sense, make sure they're not anything crazy, anything malicious. And then if those are all good, then we're going to want to request from the user permission to move forward. So we're going to send to the user agent, the browser, we're going to send a request either to allow or deny this connection. So let's first validate the method, which is going to be real nice and simple because we're just going to copy these 4 lines right here. We're going to go back here. There we go. And it's just checking, making sure we're still just a GET request. If it's anything else, if it's a post, a delete, a patch, anything like that, don't do anything with it. Throw an error. So we got that. To validate the request, we're going to want to first get the params. So for this if statement, we'll define variables in the scope, and we'll do URL query. And then let's validate in a separate function. So we'll do valid auth request. We'll have valid auth request return a Boolean, either yes, it's a valid auth request, or no, it is not. Don't do anything with this. So then everything in here is what we'll do if it is a valid auth request. If it's not a valid auth request, we'll just grab this. We'll throw an error, and we'll just say unauthorized. Unauthorized. Boom, boom. All right, so let's start building this valid auth request function. We'll do valid auth request. If I can spell, there we go. All right, and inside here, we're going to be getting the params from the URL. And so this is going to be of type URL values. And we need to, import URL. And we'll do values. There we go. Oh, and we're going to need it to return a Boolean to make sure it's valid. So we're going to, in order to check this is a valid auth request, we're going to get those params. And we're just going to, for simplicity's sake, have a big if statement checking if we're all good. So in this if statement, we're going to need to first check that the client ID is correct. We're going to want to check that the redirect URI is the same one that we have on file for this client, for this client's application. That's important because we don't want to send the access token to a redirect URI that we're not expecting. We don't want to send it to just random places, you know. The other thing we're going to want to check is that the response type is of code and that the scope is included in the application that in our example, the print shop applications on file scopes and all of that good stuff. So what we're going to need to do is create some sort of data type in order to store the application information that usually is submitted beforehand, either on some sort of form when you're applying for a OAuth, when you're applying for a client ID, client secret, all of that sort of stuff for your application. If we got that, then we'll be all good to go. And so we're going to need to define some types here. So let's go into authorization. We'll go types go. Inside here, we'll do package auth. And from here, it's probably best to first off, we're going to need the same values we have from here, these port and server, because they are a separate package. So we'll just throw those in here for when we need them later. Some types we're going to define. The first thing we're going to define is a client ID. And the reason for that is When you start getting into maps, it becomes a little bit hard if everything is marked as a string. And so I'm just marking it as client ID. So when we have the key of maps be client ID, that's way easier to understand than when it's string. So that's what we're doing this here right now. And then we're going to need to find a struct, which will be an app. So this is going to be the application data stored on file with the photo server. So the photo web server, what they have on file for the redirect URI, the client ID, the client secret, all that good stuff. So let's go struct. We'll have client ID, which is going to be of type client ID. We'll have a client secret, which is going to be of type string. We're going to have a redirect URI, which is going to be of type string, and a scope, which is going to be a array, a slice of strings. Okay, so let's go on in, and let's make a data file, which is just going to store those applications and all. And in here we'll have var apps. So these are just going to be the applications and their data. And for simplicity, we're just going to use a map. And as I was talking about earlier, this is where if you, okay, all right. This is where you're going to have client ID as the key. Just for simplicity's sake, this makes a million times more sense for me than string. So, and we'll have a bunch of applications here. And all what we're going to put in is our print shop application, which is going to have a client ID of print shop. If I can spell print shop, the client secret, let's do, thinking of a word, or maybe a bunch of numbers. Let's do Alpine. Okay, and then redirect URI, we're going to want this to be the client URI. And then we're going to want to choose a route that we want the access token to be sent to. In the example, it uses CB, which stands for callback. That makes a lot of sense to use. The other one I see often, I've seen it with Google OAuth. When I've used the Google API, I see just callback as the URI often. And I think we'll use callback as the URI in our situation. So localhost 8090 is the one that we'll say is on file, and we'll do callback. And when it comes to scopes, the only one we'll include is all. Yeah, you could go crazy with your scopes, but for us, we won't worry about it. Okay, so that is all of our applications. So let's get going on getting the params out of the form on the server side this time. So let's open up the, I guess, hell, let's just go grab these from the client. It's all the same stuff. We're going to need the response type, the client ID. We don't have the client secret yet. We don't have the scope. Inside validation, we don't need to worry about the state. And I think that should do it. Let's just make sure. There we go. All right, so those should be all the params we need. We're going to do all of our checks now. So first thing, we're going to check if there's an application in our apps that has the same client ID. So we'll do client ID. And we'll check if present. So first check, is it present? If that's true, we go on to the next step, all right? If it's present, next thing we want to check is the redirect URI the same between the params that were just sent in from the client and the one that is stored on file? If we're good there, the next thing we want to check, let's check if the response type is code. If they entered the type as code, then we know what to do next. We know which method and grant type to respond to and how to respond to it. So we gotta make sure it's a response type of code. Next, we're going to want to check that the scope that was sent with the request is one of the scopes inside the application's available scopes. So we're going to check that, make sure that the when inputted is contained within the application scopes. And if that's all the case, then we're just going to return true because we're all good. And if not, we'll return false. And we will check all the errors. First thing, we don't want the type, we want the variable. Second thing, we want to cast this as a variable, a client ID as opposed to a string. So now it's a client of type client ID as opposed to just a string. So that is how we're going to validate the initial authorization request. We're going to go through, get the response type, the client ID, redirect URI scope. We're going to check if the if there's with that client ID an application that is present. If that is the case, we're going to then check if the redirect URI is the same. If that's the case, we're going to then check that the response type is of code, and if the scope that is sent with the request is one of the scopes we have available. That's all good. We have a true response that it is a valid auth request, and then we go on to whatever goodness we got going on in here. So let's get that last little bit done there. What we will do, we're going to need to do a couple things here. If we know the authorization request is accurate, we're going to first want to create a new set of access token and authorization code for this connection. And then we're also going to want to save the state that the client gave us so we can verify it's the correct client moving on in the future. So in order to do that, we're going to need to create some access token types. So let's go back over to our types. And we're going to want to create a type of access combination. I cannot spell. Combination. There we go. All right. And an access combination, this isn't necessarily how the only way of doing this, but it's the way that I figure would just be the easiest, which is have an access combination struct, and then just have a state, a authorization code in there, and access token in there as well. So these are the values we're going to be using later in the different requests, but we need to do it right now because we need to store the state for later to verify. And we're also going to need a constructor in order to build this access combination, the newest access combination. So let's create a function, new access combination. It's going to take a state string because we get that from the client. It is going to return a pointer to an access combination. And it's going to return a real simple pointer to the access combination that we initiate, which is going to have a state of state that we get from the client and a code We're going to, in our implementation, in our demo, we're going to use a random integer for the code and access token. I don't think this is how you do it in production, but correct me if I'm wrong, but something about that doesn't feel right. So we'll do code int. Let's just make a copy of that and do access token. There we go. So we have the state from the client, and then we initiate a random integer for the code and access token. So got that. Let's create a variable called access combination. Excuse me. And that will be a map. Let's do make map because we're going to initiate it. And the type will have the client ID as the key, and then an access combination as the value. So got that. And now we need to create them whenever we have a valid request, a valid authorization request. So let's go in here. We are going to get the combo back from the new access combination constructor, which is going to take the state, which means we need to get the state from the params. So we're going to do state, which is equal to params dot get state. And we're also going to need the client ID as well, because we're going to use that as the key in the access combinations map. We'll do client ID. Oh, yeah, I guess that's a good spot for the good spot as ever to cast it. And we're going to take the combo, which is a pointer, so we're just pointing to that one created in the new access combination constructor. So that's what we need to do in order to create the access combo and store it in our access combinations. And then we're going to need to request user permission next. So let's create a request user permission function. And this is going to be it's going to need to take the HTTP response writer and also the request in order to check stuff. So let's grab all those. As you can imagine, we're going to need a lot of these params. Let's just grab these right now. And I'll grab all of them from the client. That'd be easiest. There we go. All right, so we got way too many variables now. We aren't going to need the response type at this point. We're not going to need the client secret because we didn't get that from the client. And I think that is all we're going to need. We're going to send a new URL to the user agent now. Now that we're on the redirected to the server can now ask the user agent to either log in or authorize the request. And so what we can do is we can send it to a different route on the server in order to complete that. So URL, we'll send it using sprintf. We will get the, we're going to need the server URL, and we'll do, I'm going to say login. It isn't really a login. It's just sort of maybe slash access. Let's say access. Let me make sure I'm not using that for anything else later. I am using that for something else later. Let's stick to login. Login is you could have the user re-log in, or you could just have it that them validate the request and say it's all good. So we'll do client ID, which a lot of this stuff we're just sending in order to fill in the form that gets submitted. The user doesn't actually have to okay the information on here. And scope equals %s and state equals %s. So we're going to first get the server URL, client ID, we're going to get the redirect URI, we're going to get the scope, and we're going to get the state. Well, HTTP redirect response writer, the request. We're then going to send it to the URL. We're going to go HTTP redirect. That's not working. The status. Am I going crazy? I am missing a comma. I am going crazy. Redirect, and it's a temporary redirect. So that's what we do if it's all good. We're going to request user permission at the /login route. So let's put that all down here. Request user permission. Request user permission, which takes WNR, I believe it was. Yes, okay. So that's all we need to do for the authorization. And now let's go and build on the server, or we are on the server, but the page in order to log in, which is just going to be saying allow or deny in our situation. You could have the user re-log in order to authenticate, but we will just authenticate and authorize, but we'll just have them authorize by hitting allow or deny. So let's just put that on the server here. We'll go here to log in. And remember, this is going to be on the server side. And so we already had I guess it's worth showing where we're sitting right now. A demo would be good, huh? All right, there we go. So if we go to the print shop, go over here, we're going to have client ID, which I believe we had print shop, client secret was Alpine, and scope was all. So when we hit allow, it's going to send us to the server, the print shop server, which right now we're unauthorized. And I believe that is because we have a different redirect URI. And so we're going to need to fix that, but we can see that the client and the server are talking to each other. We were on 8090, and now we're on 8080. We're now on, the browser is now speaking to the server, the print photo server, after being redirected by the print service. So let's go back over here. Let's fix that wee little problem where we had, I believe it's on the client side, we need to switch the client URL to be equal to /callback, I believe it was. Let's just check here. Yes, /callback. Now if we go to the client and we redo the client, go back over here, and we go 8090. Let's try doing, we did print shop as client ID, the secret was supposed to be Alpine, and the scope is all. Hopefully this doesn't say unauthorized. It still says unauthorized. Let's see here. 89 callback. All's all good. Client ID is print shop. It may just be saying that. Let's see here. Client ID, was it print shop? It was print shop. It was Alpine. It was 8090 callback. 8090 callback. Did we get to the login page? Oh, we did get to the okay. All right, we got unauthorized just by default, but we did get to the login page, which is what we needed. So we are doing all good. Everything's all good. We are going to the right page. So now that we're on the right page, oh, I see. Oh, that's scary. It's because we kept on going in a loop back to the authorized page, even if we didn't have anything to authorize. So let's make a new function here, which is just going to be used to authenticate things, or to authorize things. So we'll do R, which is pointer to the request. And from here, we're going to want to grab those parameters again, fill out another form, and move forward from there. So let's grab them from the client again. We'll have to remove a bunch of these, but let's just grab them while we're here. Go back to the server. No client secret, client ID. I don't believe we have a response type. I do believe we have a scope state, client ID, and redirect URI. So with all of that in mind, let's go and create a new HTML template using this method. Let's go duck type. It's going to be HTML with HTML, HTML. We're going to have head, body, and then for the title, remember this is the server now. This is no longer the print shop. This is the photo server. So the title we can do maybe something like photo gallery. And then just to really shoot it home that this is a different website, this is a different web server, we're going to, just for this demo, use a different background color so you can see that when it's on the client and when it's on the server. So we'll do background color, let's do blue. We'll just color all of it blue, so you know we're on the server at this point, on the photo gallery instead of on the print service. And we're going to want to put on a header. We'll do photo gallery. We'll do a boom, 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 boom. Let's say print service is requesting access to your photos. And yeah, that should do it. And then we'll have a form that gets submitted from here. And since this is going to be on the server, we will do a post method and just switch it up a little bit, you know. Post method, action. We're going to send it to a URL on a route on our server, on our print server, and we'll need to decide that once we got the form all created. So we'll go in here. We're going to have a lot of similar things, but we're going to have mostly hidden values. So input type will be a hidden one there. Let's just make another template. Name equals and value equals. And all these values are going to be inputted by the previous user request permission function we did earlier. So we're going to have 4 values. First one is going to, well, I guess all of them are going to be hidden. But the first one is going to be named client ID. Second one's going to be named redirect URI. Then we're going to have scope. Then we're going to have state. And then we're going to have the type submit. And this will be name equals action. And then the value will be equal to allow. And we'll do allow. So this should be a form that comes from the server where it says, hey, the photo gallery, you're on the photo gallery, the print service is requesting access to your photos. And then you hit allow, and then it sends all of this information back to the server after hitting allow, after saying I consent and I authorize this connection. I guess we better first finish the putting the values in here. So we're going to need to put in the client ID as the first input value, redirect URI as the second, scope as the third, and state as the last. We'll do format print f print. And we'll do HTML. Alrighty, so that should be a login page. Let's check and make sure the login page works. It's yelling at me about an extra rate to the server. We probably did not put returns in our... Sure enough, we didn't put returns in here. After you send an error, make sure error to the response writer. Make sure you don't keep running things. So we'll put returns here and returns there. And then let's make sure, I think, since that doesn't have any if logic, we should be all good. And so let's do that here. Return. There we go. So we shouldn't have any more oddities with that. Let's try fixing that up, Rerun the server, rerun the client. Now we should go to 90. We go client ID, which is print shop. Client secret, which was Alpine. The scope is equal to all. And there we go. We are now on the photo gallery server, and it's asking if you want to allow the print service to have access to your photos, and we hit allow. Right now we don't have it going any place in particular, but that is this is now on the server, no longer on the client, no longer on the print service. This is the photo gallery server. So that's all working great. Let's go back over to here and let's send it down to the next step, which is throwing it into a like a request approval function to handle the next step. So let's go back over to the server and let's do that. Let's send it to consent, which will be another route in order to handle once someone has okayed the authorization, what happens now, you know, where we go next. And this will be inside the auth package, and we'll do request approval. All right, let's go in here. And what we could do, let's read the spec a little bit. So, authorization response, if the resource owner, if the user has given access to the request, then we send a authorization code to the client from the server. We're going to be using a form encoding for this, and it is going to be just a redirect with the form as queries in the URL. So we're going to send that, and it's 302, so I believe that's temporary redirect. And the only information we're sending is that code that we added to the access combination when we created the access combinations. And so we're just going to send that back to the client and tell them, hey, this is the authorization code, and the state is going to be the one that we got previously from the client. And so we're going to send that all to the client now. So we got consent there. Let's go in, make a new folder called consent, or code, excuse me. Consent goes to request approval, which is in the code file. We're going to call it code since this is all handling the authorization code stuff. So, request approval. And as you can imagine, this is going to take a response writer, and then it's going to also take a pointer to a request, and then all right, there we go. So we're going to want to parse the information that was submitted with the form from the login, from the allowing the big blue screen we had earlier. We want to parse the information that was submitted there, and then if that's a valid request, then we go and send the code to the client. So first thing we're going to want to do, check method, like we always do. Then we're going to want to parse the form and check for errors. Then we're going to want to validate request. And then send the code if it's all good. So let's go and grab the validating of the method from the first, from the authorization page. And in here, we're going to want to make sure it is a post request. There we go. If it's not, ignore it and move on. Don't touch it. And at this time, we're also going to want to parse the form. And if there's an error there, we're going to want to say unauthorized or unable to parse. Throw a HTTP error of some sort. So let's grab all these. And let's say unauthorized, just for simplicity's sake. I'm sure you can get crazy with the actual error values. So, and then we're going to want to validate the request. This is going to be similar to what we did with the authorization, the authorizing of the initial request here. It's going to be something very similar. And actually, in the same vein, we're going to want to throw an error if it is not okayed. So we'll do if a valid request, not auth request, if valid request approval, we'll say, and this will take in the request. And let's go down. And let's just make a function quickly for validating that. We'll do valid request approval. And we'll take that pointer. And we're going to want to return If it is a valid request, we're going to want to return the client ID to be used later for sending the code. We're going to want to know which code to send from the access combination. So we're going to need that from the valid request approval, and we're also going to want a Boolean for if it is a valid request or not. So we'll have of type client ID and bool. Alrighty. And then we're going to want to parse the form data from the post request. So, well, we already parsed it. We're going to want to go through it now. First thing we're going to want to get is the action from the form. That is that submit button. We're going to want to make sure that they actually allowed it. So we're going to make sure that the action is allow. We're also going to want to get the state that was submitted. And we're going to want to make sure that that state is the same. We're going to want to make sure that someone didn't interfere with it and change out the state, or someone isn't trying to send something to our server without going through the proper channels. And we're going to cast the form client ID to a client ID type. So we'll do client ID. There we go. And at this time, we're going to want to do if action is equal to allow. So we're checking, is it a allowed request? Did the user allow it? And then we're going to want to check the state. Now, we're going to need to grab from the access combination at that client ID the state, and these two should be the same. So, let's get the stored state. Let's go stored state, which is going to be from access combinations at client ID, and that will be the state at that point. So that should be the stored state. And that should be it. If those two things are true, then we should be all good and we can return the client ID and true. If that's not the case, let's just return client ID. It won't really matter. And false. And let's switch that out with that. And let's go up here to where we get the info out of this function. We get out the client ID and we get out if it's an okay, if it's valid. And we're just going for the if statement, check if it's okay. If it's okay, then we want to send the code. And for sending the code, we're going to want to do another function, I'd say. Let's go down here, we'll go function, send code. HTTP response writer, as you can imagine, we'll have it pointed to a request, or the pointer to the request. And in this situation, we're also going to want the client ID, because that's how we're going to specify the correct access combinations. So we'll do, as we can see from the spec, and I believe I had mentioned it previously, we're going to send that code and the state. As I had mentioned previously as well, we are not going to be doing any lifetimes or expiration on the code. Just for simplicity's sake, feel free to implement this on your own. And we're also not going to be removing the code from the access combinations after a certain amount of time in cleaning out stuff. So just be aware of that. That is something that in a actual production service you would want to do that. But we'll do code, and that's going to be from access combinations at the client ID, and we will have code. And I am cursed to capitalize client ID whenever I don't want to. And we'll have redirect URI or URL, which will be equal to the value. And this is going to be coming from the apps over here, the apps variable, as opposed to the access combinations. So we're going to want to go apps. We're going to want to grab that using the client ID, and that is going to be the redirect URI. And so that's where we're going to want to send the code to. And the state, if it's all good, then we can just use the state available in the access combination or from the URL, the form that was submitted. Either one works. It's not that big of a deal. So let's just do state. And we'll build the URL to send the code to. And this is going to be another the 302, the redirect, and they're just going to be query params at the end of the redirect URL. So let's go back over here. We're going to do fmt sprintf. We're going to do the redirect URL, and then we're going to do %code, which is equal to question mark code, %s, and state, which is equal to %s as well. We're going to have redirect URL, we're going to have the code, and we're going to have the state as well. And we can put that all on one line, make it all pretty. And we're going to do a redirect. In this redirect, we take the response writer and the request. We also take the URL we just built, and we're going to send it with a code temporary redirect. So we should be all good at this time. We should be redirecting back to the print service with the code, the authorization code. So we're not all the way to the access token yet, but we are at the point that we have from the client, the print service client, we have sent to the photo gallery service. We've said, hey, I want access to this. This is my client ID, and send it over to the server. The server says, all right, I want to make sure this is okay with the user. So I'm going to send a request to the user agent, the browser. I'm going to say, hey, is this all good? Just hit allow and we're all good to go. You click allow, and then it goes back to the code goes from there to the client, from the photo gallery service to the print service. And now the print service has the authorization code to move forward to the next steps. And let's just make sure that all works without error. Let me make sure I didn't do, I forgot, okay, hold on. Everyone hold, there we go. Send code, send code, WR, and client ID. And then if we're all good, we're going to want to hit return. So that looks all good to me. And so let's rebuild our server. And let's rebuild our client just for good measure. And the hope is now to go through the process. We want to have the white screen that we fill in with the form. We want to then have the blue screen here where you have to hit allow. And then we want to go on to another white screen. I guess it'll be an error of some sort because we're going to hit that callback URL that we haven't filled in, but we should see in the query params, we should see the authorization code and the state included in that. And so if those two things are good, then we've made it to a good spot. So let's go over here. Let's go print shop. Let's go client secret is Alpine, and the scope is all. We hit allow. Now we're on the server. We're going to want to hit allow, and we are not authorized. We did not get out of out of here. Let's see what happened. I probably forgot to add in the correct. Oh, oh, that's embarrassing. Camel case versus versus snake case. It'll get you sometimes. All right, there we go. All right, figured it all out. All right, so we can get rid of all these print functions, and theoretically, we should be all good now. Let's see here. All right, rerun that. Rerun the server. Print shop. We're going to do Alpine for the secret and all for the scope. Are we allowed? Yes. And we made it. All right, so we're back on the client now. And as you can see in the query params, we now have the code, which is for us a random int, and the state, which is also a random int. So from this point, in the next part of this demo, we're going to take this code and send it back to the let me bring it up here, back to the authorization server using the authorization code. That's this part D. Send it back up to the authorization server. If the code's all good and the other stuff that is sent with it, then we're going to get an access token from the authorization server, which is used by the client to access the super secret and the user data that is wanting to be shared. So we got done today A, B, and C. And now the plan moving forward is to get D and E done in the next one, and hopefully get access to the photos. Hopefully the printing service will get access to the photos. Previously, we had gone through and we had done portions A, B, and C. We got the original request put through, and then we authenticated with the authorization server and then received the authorization code. The client did. The print service received a authorization code from the authorization service, the resource server for the photo gallery library thingy-majig. So now that the client has that, what we're going to want to do is send that code back to the authorization server, showing that we have the authorization code. And then from there, the authorization server will hopefully share the access token with the client so that the client can authenticate and get access to the super secret stuff that came from the user. In our demonstration of photo library, but we'll have some data in there just to give access to. So let's get on down to the access token request. For the access token, in order to request the data, we are going to have to specify the grant type as authorization code. The code is going to have to be put in. That's the code we received earlier from the authorization server. Going to have to provide the redirect URI, and then we're going to have to also provide, so if depending on the type of client, if it's a confidential or a public client, you have to provide the client ID in a different spot. So since we're doing a confidential client, we are going to want to put the client ID and client secret in there to authenticate. And we're going to put that in the authorization header, and that's put in just using basic auth. And with basic auth, in normal or the standard implementation, you have the username and then password as the inputs, and then you split those up with a colon, and then you base 64 encode the entire thing. But in our case, we're going to put in the client ID colon the client secret. And so we're going to put that in the authorization header of the request. And then the rest will be input as a post form, a form content type on a post request, and we won't have to provide the client ID again inside the form itself. So we're going to set this up on the client, and then we will go from there. So let's open up the NeoVim here, the code editor. So we are getting from let's see here, there we go. We are getting when we go through put in the client ID, client secret, which was Alpine, and the scope of all, go through, we accept. In the callback URL, the params are the code and the state, which are things we're going to want to pull. So let's go down here. We're on the callback URL here. Inside this callback, we are going to want to grab the params. So we're going to do params, which come from the request. So request URL, query. Nice part is there's just two here. There is the code, which is going to be params.get. And we're going to want to get code, and then the state, which is going to be params.get state. All right, so now that we have the callback handler on the client, what we're going to want to do is grab from the params the code and the state. From there, we're going to want to take those params and put them into two separate functions. One will be the get access token function, and that will work in order to shoot a get request or a post request, excuse me, in order to get the access token from the authorization server. From there, we're going to take that token and make another request in order to get the protected data from the resource server. So what we'll do is we will get the params, just using the URL query, and then we're going to have those two different functions in order to get the token and the data. So we'll do token access is a good name, get access token, and that's going to take the response writer and the params. And then we'll also, let's start with that. Format, and at the end we'll just print off the token, just to make sure we know what we're doing. All right, so function, get access token. This is going to take that writer of type response writer and the params of type URL values. And then inside here, we're going to want to grab those we are going to want to grab that code, and we're also going to want to build a new a client in order to request the information from the server, the access token from the server. So the simplest would be to first let's start with the form in order to make the request. And as we saw earlier, we are going to need the grant type, the code, and redirect URI. So let's go back over here. We're going to have a form, which is going to be a set of values, a map of values. We're going to have a grant type. And we'll do string. I believe it was authorization code. Yes, authorization code. So type authorization code. And then we're going to have the code itself, which is going to be from the params we received earlier from the response. I'm getting very bright. Hold on. I am very bright in my corner over here. There we go. All right. And so that's going to be from params. We're going to do a get, and we'll get the code. And then the other value was the redirect URI, which we're going to want to use the client URI. We're going to want to send it back over here. So client URL. And that should be the form. So that's the data we're sending to the authorization server in order to get the access token. The authorization server will use the same endpoint as they use in the documentation, which is /token. So that'll be our route. We will do format sprintf, and this is going to be the server URI, and we'll do /token. Server URL. So we're going to make a new request from scratch. In order to do this, we'll do a request with an error, HTTP new request. Type is going to be post, URL is going to be URI, and then we're going to want to encode this form as the correct type, and in Go you gotta do strings new reader form.encode. Alright, so now we have the request built. This request we're going to have to also add that basic authentication, basic authorization, excuse me. And so we're going to have to throw that onto the top of the header. And luckily Go has a simple basic auth header creator, but pretty much what's happening is we're going to do client ID colon client secret, and this is effectively what's happening there. Is you have the word basic, so the incoming the server receiving this request will have a know which type of authorization to do, and then it'll know to de-encode the client ID and client secret from this request. So that's why we do it, and since we're a confidential request, we're going to confidential client, we're going to have this in the header as opposed to in the body. So okay, so what we'll do in here is we'll go request set basic auth, and it's just going to have the client ID as the username and client secret as the password. And then just for good measure, we will define the content type header. Content type, and that's going to be equal to application xww form encoded, and that's just to be on the safe side. So let's build a new client in order to request that, a new HTTP client, and we'll do the builder there, and then we're going to get a response doing client do. We're going to do the request and then check for errors. If error equals nil, then we'll throw an error to the client or to the user agent, the browser, or whatever's making the request. We'll do bad request, and we'll just do bad request. Now we're going to want to go through the data that is sent in the body of the request, because we're going to receive a response from the authorization server as long as it's not an error, and we want to parse that information in order to get the access token on the client side. So we're going to, I better defer the closing of the response body. Hold on. There we go. So we are going to want to store the data, and we'll store it in a string. And then we're going to scan the body. Buff.io, new scanner. And this will be res body. And then for each line in the response, we're going to want to write that data, append it to the string we had in order to store the data. And we'll store it as text. So hopefully we get sent back the access token here. That's what the data is going to be, and we're going to want to store that. Now, one catch here is we're going to also need to store the access token type. And so as we can see here, in our situation with the demo, it won't really matter that we have the token type, but in more complex systems and in production, you're going to want to have the token type here, as they discuss, I believe. Yeah, token type syntax. And so that's in order to differentiate different tokens and all of that good stuff. So let's go back to 4.1. Let's go back to top here. Okay, so I think this is a good spot to go back to the server, because now we're getting the response from the request originally, but we need to build the logic on the server in order to handle the authorization code request. So let's go back over to the server, and we're going to be hitting it at the token endpoint. And what could we name this? It's going to be receiving the tokens, probably get access token, or receiving the code, getting the, so get access token. And we'll go make a new token.go file in order to handle the sending of the token. And we'll do get access token, and this handler is going to have HTTP response writer. And we're going to have the request as well, as usual. Put it there. In order to build the get access token handler, we're going to need to do a lot of the same stuff we've done previously. We're going to want to check if it's a valid method. So get, post, all that good stuff. We're going to want to make sure it's a post one. So Going to have to do that. We're going to have to parse the data. We're going to have to get the form data from the request. And then we're going to want to check if it's a valid request, if it's a valid code request. And if it is, then we want to grant the access token by sending it to the request. So, to the client. And this will look very similar to what we did with the code one. We're going to want to pull these over here. Since those are all the same, we're just checking if it's a post method again. We're going to have to parse the form again. So this is all stuff we can copy. And then we're going to want to check if the code is valid, and we're going to need to pull, let's do valid code request. And let's define a function. Actually, before we do anything, I'm going to put the return because I keep on forgetting to put the return in there. And then the next thing will be a put error if something bad happens. And that'll be unauthorized. Unauthorized. Alright, we'll do func valid code request. Create that. And this valid code request, what is going to have to occur for it to be a valid request? Well, we have to make sure that the authorization is correct. We want to make sure the client ID and client secret are okay. We want to make sure nothing crazy is happening there. And then we're going to want to ensure that the code was one that we sent out. We want to make sure the code matches. We're going to want to check that the redirect URI is included, and also that it matches the one we have on file. So check that it's authorization code grant. That'll be the first thing. Check if the redirect URI is correct. That'll be the second thing. Ensure that the code we sent is correct and matches what we have on record, and then check the client ID and client secrets to make sure those are correct as well. So that's what we're going to have to do to validate. And in order to do all of that, we're going to need to get the request with the request status. So we'll do HTTP request, and we'll throw R in there. So we're going to go params r.form. This will allow us to get the form info. We'll do grant type, which comes from params get grant type. That's the wrong button. There we go. And then we're going to want to get the code, which is from the code param. We're going to want to get the redirect URI, and that will be from redirect URI. And then we're going to want to get the client ID and client secret from the basic authorization header. So we'll do client ID. Now the one catch here is we're going to have a version sent as a string, and we're going to want to convert this to be our client ID type. So we'll just call it client ID string. We'll do secret, since secret is a string as well. And I believe there's also a OK value to check. And that all comes from the basic auth. We'll get the client ID by converting the client ID string, casting it to a client ID type. And then we're going to check if the OK variable is OK. We want to make sure basic auth actually worked. And If it is not okay, we'll want to return. And now we're going to want to check our apps. We're going to want to go through our applications that we had earlier. So we had in our data form, we had our app, which has the client ID as the key, client ID as a value, a client secret, redirect URI, and the scope. So if that's the wrong place. If we go back over here, we're going to want to go apps and put in the client ID. So this will check if the client ID, if a matching app is in our apps with that same client ID that we just got from the client. And then we're also going to want to get the access combinations from the access combinations data as well. And that's also by client ID. And we put that information in. That's the access token, the code earlier, and the state. So we're going to want to pull that as well. Go access combinations and check the client ID. And we'll do the right type there. Alrighty. And we can also check if it is present. Because if it's not in the access combinations thing, we don't do anything. I guess we could also check if it's present in the app as well. And let's lowercase that. Then we can take the, we're also going to want to take the code that we had up here, and we're going to want to parse it out in order to check that it's actually an integer, because we're using ints for everything. So we'll do code, and we also have an error. We'll use strcom iota, or no, not iota, a toy. And we'll go to the end and convert that. And I misspelled nothing, we just need to import. strconv. I believe it's just strconv. Yes, okay. That's strconv. Now we're going to want to do one of those big if statements. So if error equals nil, we want to make sure that there are no errors in our program at this point. And we're going to want to check that each of those values is present, the app and access combinations. Luckily, if there's one, there better be the other. We're going to want to check that the grant type is equal to authorization code. Authorization, make sure we spelled it right. We're going to want to check that the redirect URI equals the application's redirect URI. We're going to want to make sure that our code is equal to the access combination code. We're going to want to also make sure that the client secret is equal to the application client secret. Now the nice part is we don't have to check the client ID again, because if it's present in the application's map, then we know that the application exists and that the client ID does match something. So if I get any brighter, I'm going to be an angel. Hold on. And if that's the case, we want to return a Boolean true, that we're all good. If that's not true, we're going to want to return a Boolean false, because if those things are not all the case, then we want to, bad, not valid, and throw the unauthorized. So the other thing that we are going to need later when we're inside this function, doing the grant access to the token to the client, we're also going to need the client ID later, and so I'm just going to return the client ID with the Boolean at this time, just to make things simpler for later on. So we will come in here, we're going to return the client ID and a Boolean. The Boolean will be if it's valid or not. And we could also come up here and go, client ID is the first thing being returned, and then an OK is being returned. And then the actual if statement is going to check if it's okay. Alrighty. So if we're not okay, we could just return the client ID. It doesn't really matter, but we do need to return false. And that's the same case if there's nothing. If all these cases are not met, we'll return client ID if they are all met, and return true as well. So this is validating the code request. If it's a valid code request, we're going to want to then give access to the access token. We're going to want to send the access token to the client requesting it. So let's make a function in order to handle the granting of the access token. Grant access token w client ID, and we're going to, for the grant access token, take in the writer, because we're now writing a response, and we are going to need that client ID as I had mentioned previously. I switched those around. All right. There we go. And then type client ID. And then this shouldn't return anything, so we can just start building this immediately. Grant access token takes the writer and client ID. And how are we going to grant the access token? We're going to need to first get the access token from the access combinations. So we'll go access token, grab that from the access tokens. It probably would be best to convert it to a string as well, if I can spell. So we'll take that access combination and we'll go client ID to get that client ID specific access combination and access combination. And we're just going to convert it to a string because we're going to have to send it as a string, all that good stuff. And we're going to have to create the JSON that we get sent, that we send to the client. Here's the response here. So access token response. If we're valid and authorized, we're going to issue the access token and refresh token. Oh, in our demonstration, we're not going to be doing the refresh token. So just the access token. And then we're going to also send the token type as well. All of this stuff here we don't need to worry about. Just these top two, the access token and token type. And these are being sent just as a standard piece of JSON, and it will just be a OK request. So go back in here. We're going to build that, we'll call it data. We might change that up later, but that's going to be a map of strings so we can marshal it really easily. String. And this will be an access token, I believe. Yeah, access token and then token type. Access token and then token type. And the token type, for us, let's just do example. It doesn't really matter for this demonstration, but yeah, we'll do example. And then we're going to want to convert it to JSON. So we're going to go bytes and air. We're going to do JSON.marshal, and we're going to marshal the data. And then we'll do if air, turn nil. If there's an error, let's just throw an HTTP error. I might just actually pull the one from earlier. I guess if we get a marshal error, that's kind of a server error. And we'll do status internal server error. Then we're going to want to build our response, which is going to have a header of type, I believe it was application/JSON, and then we're going to also send the status OK. We can also send the content length just to be good. So we'll do set content type is going to be application JSON and char set UTF-8. And then we'll also copy that over. Content length would be a good one. Length of the content is going to be just the length of bytes, and we're going to convert that to a string. So conv itoa, and then that's the length of bytes. Then we'll do a write header. We're going to write HTTP status code OK, and write the bytes to the response. So at this time, we have the this function here gets the access token from the access combinations. It then creates a piece of JSON data that gets sent as a response to the client from the authorization server, saying, all right, you're all good, gave us the right code, everything's all hunky-dory, you give us the right client ID, the right client secret. Here is your access token in order to access the protected data. So let's go over to, I guess we could go back to our client here, and then let's just write to the screen, to the browser, what our access token is in order to show it's all working. Okay. And we'll just write the body of the response, which will be all the JSON. So we'll throw the JSON in there. And we have one error. What is it yelling at me about? Get access token. Oh. All right, for right now, we don't have a. Yeah, all right. Yeah. Yeah. Trying to decide what I should do in order to demonstrate this. So we'll re-up our client in order to get the new client changes. We'll re-up our server in order to get the new server changes. Now, if we go back over here, let's run through our where we're sitting right now is we got the initial print shop login page, or login, sharing the OAuth implementation, the first page of the OAuth implementation to make the request. And so we're going to take the print shop as the client ID. Secret's going to be Alpine. Scope is going to be all. We hit allow. Then we go to the authorization server and it says, hey, do you really want to share this with this weird print shop that's asking for access? And then we can hit allow. And where did we get stuck? Unauthorized. I probably did not do... Let's see here. It's probably a missing... Okay, we got a callback. Get access token. Redirect URI grant. Client ID. Client URL. Okay. All good there. It says we're unauthorized. So that would be in here. Oh, I forgot to switch that around. That's not what the problem is, but that's something we gotta keep in mind. Do we do a post? Let's make sure we did post. Yes. Post. So we're either hitting this unauthorized, or that must be the unauthorized we're hitting. Authorization code. We're doing client ID true. We have the, let me check this. Oh, again, camel versus snake. All right, there we go. Let's try that again. One day, changing capitalization won't bite me in the butt, but today is not that day. All right, we'll do this again. Initial page, print shop, client secret Alpine, scope all, and we'll allow it. And there we go. So we get back from the server the access token and token type example. So at this time, the client now has access to the resources and the in our situation, the photo gallery that we wanted to share with the print shop. Now, for demonstration purposes, we'll build that as well. Build we will build as well the final connection there where it gets access to the super secret data. I believe, yeah, they don't have that portion here because at this time it's just sending the access token, making sure the access token is all good, and then sharing the data. So let's just go on in here and we'll do the request, which we'll put inside resource. If we're going based on, just to show where we're finally at, we just got done with E. So we did the authorization code and redirection URI that we sent to the authorization server, and the authorization server has responded with the access token. So client's all good to go. We're going to do one final request for the data, and then we're going to have the resource portion of the server respond with the data if it's all good. And yeah, we have super secret photos as the print shop. And what we can do is in here, let's make the request first. So once we have get access token, let's handle what we do with the JSON that we receive from the server on the client side. So once we have the data here, instead of printing it to the screen, because that would be pretty wild, we will go through and build. We should probably, if we want to unmarshal this, let's put in a new type of token, and we'll just unmarshal it to a struct, just to make things a little bit easier. It'll have the access token, which is going to be a string from the JSON, and in JSON it's going to be access token, then token type, which is going to be token type. So in order to unmarshal it, we're going to have to first initialize a new token, and use the correct syntax. And then we're going to go to JSON unmarshal. We're going to unmarshal the data as bytes, I believe is what we will have to do. Data, because a string will not be unmarshaled nicely. And then we'll send that to the byte. Yeah, we'll convert it to a byte array, cast it to a byte array, and then we're going to point it to the token that we initialized. And then we will return that token for when we have to make the request. So come up here, we're going to return a token. So up here, we're going to have token being returned. And then this token is going to have to be used in order to get that super secret data, which means we're going to have to make a new function to get the protected data by making another request. And we'll do, that's going to return a secret of some sort, the secret data that we have stored on our resource portion of the server, on our print shop, or not print shop, excuse me, our photo gallery. And we're going to want the print shop to access this. And so the way we're going to do that is go back to our client. We're going to do a get protected. I cannot spell. Get protected data. And this is going to take a response writer as well, and the token. So we'll go function get protected data, which takes in HTTP response writer and the token, and then returns probably a string. Depends on how you send, what you're sending, but in our case, it'll be just a string. Then we're going to, in order to make this new request for the data, we're going to have a URL, which we could do, what route should we take? Probably access. Just do sprintf. We're going to have our server URL, and then we'll do /access, and we're just going to have it in the query param, since this is just a standard GET request. So access token, and we'll do %s again, server URL, and then token dot access token. Nice part is since we don't have any crazy headers, we can just use the standard get method, and then it'll be using our URL. If there's an error, do not pass go, do not collect $100. If there isn't an error, we're going to defer the response body, the closing of the response body. And then we're going to want to just nab this scanner up here. We'll do and we'll also, we'll go data equals empty string. And we should probably put a colon there, and then return the data. So we're going to send to the server, the photo gallery server, we're going to send a request to the access route with the access token saying, hey, we have this access token, so we have permission to access this guy's photo library. And if it's all good, then it's all good, and the data will be shared. And what we'll do for when the data is shared, we'll take that secret data and we'll just print it to the screen. We'll print we'll print to the screen a nice little web page. We'll do doc type HTML. We'll do HTML, head, body, and this is still titled print shop. And the body is going to be super secret. And then we will insert the super secret data in here. I should probably do this as a sprintf first. And then we'll insert the secret, which will be right here. And then we write HTML, and then we'll print that to the response writer. That way it shows up in the browser. HTML. And what is it yelling at me about? I can no longer use bytes. Okay, so that should be everything we need to do on the client side, because now, as long as the access token is all good, we'll get the data and we'll be able to display it. And let's go over to the server. I think we decided it would be access as our route. And this is going to be coming from the resource side, the resource package. And I think it's simplest to just call it, I don't know, grant access, something like that. Grant access. And we're going to need to go server resource. Boop, boop, boop. And this will be we'll call this resource.go. It's going to be package resource. And then we're going to have our grant access handler. We'll do a HTTP response writer, and then we'll have the request. And hopefully we received in the hopefully we received in the query params the token. So we'll go token error, and we'll do token error because we're going to string convert we're going to convert the string that gets sent in the query params to an integer. So we'll do r.url.query. Ooh. And those are params. We're going to want to, it's probably simplest to just do this on a separate line, to be honest. I was going to try to be smooth with it. And what we're going to be getting is params get access token. If error does not equal nil, what's he yelling at me about? I need another comma there. If error does not equal nil, we're going to want to throw an HTTP error w unauthorized. HTTP unauthorized. And then yeah, probably simplest would be just to go through all of the access combinations. This is just for demonstration purposes. Go through all of the access combinations, see where the access combinations access token equals the token that was just received. This would probably be a horrendous idea in production, but just for demonstration purposes, let's just do this, go through all the tokens. If the access token does equal the token, then we're going to want to get the secret data, which is going to be client ID. Oh, we're going to have to switch this. Instead of having string, we'll do client ID. And it doesn't know what a client ID is, so we will import server auth, the server auth package that we created in the auth folder. And then I guess technically this is a auth.clientID. Is that a little better? There we go. All right. So all good there. We have the data now. And then I guess we can just write that to the response. So we'll go fprint. We'll just write the data just to make it super easy, super simple. And if there's an error, throw an error. And if we're all good there, just return. Let's make sure we're all good there. Okay. I think we are all good to try running this. So hopefully we take the access token that the client sent and we validate it and then send the data. So let's go in here. Let's go 8090. Print shop. Client shop. Client secret is Alpine. Scope is all. We go allow. Oh no. Alright, what went wrong here? Okay, did I type something in wrong? Client ID. Yes, I did. It should be print shop. I did that just to make sure you're paying attention. All right. So now we're going to the photo gallery is going to be like, are you sure you want to give print shop access to this? Yes. And sure enough, the super secret is super secret photos. And that comes directly from our hidden data, the secret data inside the resource server. So that is grand news. That is great news. What I will do, just so we can go over it one last time, I'll put this over here. We'll put our super secret right there. So you can see what's happening. And yes, this is the authorization code grant. Alrighty, so final demonstration here. We have our print shop that is trying to access our photo gallery in our photo gallery app, a separate service. And we have the separate photo gallery app that has the authorization server and the resource server combined. And in order for the print shop to access that, it needs to ask the user to okay it and make sure that everything's all good. And this entire implementation gives the print shop, the client, access to the photo gallery, the server's data, without sharing the username and password of the user with the print shop client. So the first thing that does is request that it can initiate the OAuth method, service, all of that good stuff. And it does that by filling out a form of the client ID, client secret, scope, all of that good stuff. So we'll do that. And then scope is all. So that's A. After A, the authorization server is going to request that the user through the browser says this is allowed and this is something I want to happen, and that is B here. When this occurs, then the client through the user agent, the browser, is then going to quickly handle the authorization code and send that, request the authorization code, receive the authorization code, send it back to the authorization server in order to receive the access token, and then the access token gets sent back to the client, the print shop, and then finally the print shop sends that access token to the authorization server, the resource server, in order to get access to that secret data. And all of that happens between when I hit allow here and when the data shows up. And so there's all those requests and responses happen all throughout that. And then, as we can see, as far as the user's concerned, they just gave access to the super secret photos to the print shop, the print shop client. And so yeah, that is a OAuth 2 implementation from scratch. It includes not only just the client side, but also shows you what's happening on the server, which is something I really wanted to understand, was how does the server interact with the client during this OAuth implementation. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, this long demonstration and a breakdown of how to do a OAuth implementation completely from scratch. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this one. And if you have any questions, concerns, ask them in the comments. If you want to check out the repo, it will be up on GitHub, all of that good stuff. And yeah, hope you have a good one.